but before we start today's video, we want to bring you a word from our amazing sponsor, Babbel. Is there a vacation spot that you've always wanted to visit? For me, it's Cannes, France. I was on a cruise once and we had a stop there, so I visited for a few hours and fell in love with the southern French city. It was a stunning place and it had a beautiful mix of Hollywood and Paris. Plus, the beach water was as warm as bath water. Unfortunately, I won't be making a trip to Cannes this summer, but I hope you get to go somewhere awesome this summer. When I do finally go back to Cannes, I plan on speaking French because I'll learn it with the #1 language learning app in the world, Babbel. Thanks to Babbel, I'll be able to say, "S'il vous plaît, donnez-moi votre meilleure bière, le moins cher." Or even if you weren't going away this summer, you could train your brain, and by autumn, you'll be speaking a new language. Their 10-minute interactive lessons will have you speaking practical, everyday language in just 3 weeks. They have award-winning technology, and their lessons were designed by real language teachers and not algorithms. Plus, they have a bunch of different ways to learn, like lessons, podcasts, games, and live classes with top teachers. Plus, you have nothing to lose because they have a 20-day money-back guarantee. Right now, Babbel has a great deal for criminally listed viewers. Click on the link to get 65% off. So click on the link and start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks with Babbel. Number 3. Reginald Ward. On September 18, 1983, 2 people were canoeing on the Suwannee River in Suwannee County, Florida, close to the I-10 bridge. They came across something gruesome. It was a dead body floating in the water. They contacted the police. The police pulled the body from the water. It's believed that the body had been in the water for at least a few weeks. His hands and feet were bound. 2 sandbags were wrapped around his neck. It's believed that the sandbags were supposed to weigh the body down. The medical examiner determined that the man had been shot 9 times with a .22 caliber gun. There was a pair of jeans on the body. The body had no identification on it. The victim was believed to have been a white man, 6'2", and weighed 132 pounds. Divers searched the area close to where the body was found. They found some camping gear, a .22 caliber rifle, and a hunting knife. The police discovered that the rifle and the hunting knife had been reported stolen from a house in nearby Dowling Park a few weeks earlier. A resident of the house was interviewed, and he said he was surprised that they were robbed because they owned guard dogs. The police didn't find any clues to the man's identity at the house or who may have killed him. It wasn't long before the case went cold. 27 years went by. Then in 2000, an agent with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement received a tip. The tip came from a man named William Clayton Sapp, who was in a federal prison in Jessup, Georgia. Sapp said he knew that his father, William Clayton Jr., was involved in a murder that happened near the Suwannee River near Dowling Park in 1983. He said that his father had shot a man multiple times with a .22 caliber rifle and then dumped his body in the river. It may be confusing, but William Clayton Jr. is the father and William Clayton Sapp is the son. When Sapp, the son, went to the police, Sapp Jr. was dead. The agent talked to people who knew Sapp Jr. Several of them heard he had committed a murder near the river during the early 1980s. The agent looked at cold cases, and there was only one case that matched that description. It was the John Doe who was found floating in the river in September 1983. The agent had a partial print from the body sent to the FBI for analysis. In June 2012, they were told a match had been found. It was the body of 19-year-old Reginald Ward. Initially, the John Doe was believed to have been white, but Ward was black. It's believed that his body was in the water so long that it led to skin slippage, so it didn't appear that he was a black man. Ward had run away from the Dozier School for Boys, which was in Marianna, Florida. The school later became notorious because many boys were abused and dozens were killed at the school. Ward had family who lived in Quincy, Florida. His family thought he had taken off to Ohio to live with his girlfriend. His girlfriend said she last saw him when she dropped him off at his grandmother's home in Quincy. Then, the case took an odd turn. Sapp started to change his story. He said that Ward didn't resemble the man his father had killed. He also couldn't pick Ward out of a photo lineup. The agent tried to talk to Sapp before he left prison, but Sapp refused to cooperate. The agent felt that there was insufficient information to close the case, so it was shelved once again. 9 years went by and no progress was made on the case. Then in June 2021, Jason Funch, creator of the Swanee Valley Unsolved podcast, saw the case on a website called Project Cold Case. He started reading newspaper articles about the murder. Then he contacted the sheriff's department looking for more information on the case. The sergeant with the department began to investigate the case. One thing he couldn't do was interview William Clayton Sapp. He had died in 2020. So the investigator talked to friends and family of the father and son. A close family member of Sapp Jr. revealed details of the murder. It's unclear how Sapp Jr. and Reginald Ward knew each other. But one day, Ward came into Sapp Jr.'s saloon. He had several items with him that were stolen from the house in Dowling Park. Sapp Jr. took Ward to the Swanee River, where he shot him with a stolen rifle. He put sandbags around his neck and dumped him in the water. He also dumped the gun and the knife and other stolen items. It's unclear why Sapp Jr. chose to kill Ward. The person who told the police about the murder said that Sapp Jr. had told several family members about the murder. It had been a dark secret within the family for years. In February 2021, the police said that they were confident in closing the case. If William Clayton Sapp Jr. were still alive, they would have arrested him. Reginald Ward's family was thankful to the police for their hard work, and they are happy that after 37 years, the case is finally closed. Number 2. Diane Lynn Dahn. In May 1988, 29-year-old Diane Lynn Dahn lived in Santee, California with her 2-year-old son, Mark Byer. Santee is in San Diego County and is about 20 miles northwest of downtown San Diego. Diane was described as funny and goofy, and she liked to draw. She also played the violin and the guitar. Diane worked as a communication technician with the San Diego Transit Corporation. On May 2, 1988, Diane did not show up for work. A coworker went over to her apartment at about 1 p.m. They got into the apartment and found Diane's dead body in the bedroom. The 29-year-old single mother had been beaten and stabbed multiple times in the chest. Her 2-year-old son, Mark, was found wandering around the apartment complex. There were no signs of forced entry or a break-in. The police could not find anyone who would have wanted to hurt Diane. It wasn't long before the case went cold. In 1991, the police thought they got a lead when they arrested a 23-year-old man named Cleophas Prince Jr. Prince was a suspected serial killer who the police had connected to 6 murders, which were very similar to Diane's murder. On January 12, 1990, 20-year-old Paige Schultz was found stabbed to death in her apartment in San Diego. There were no signs of a break-in or forced entry. Just over a month later, on February 16, 1990, 21-year-old Janie Weinhold was raped and stabbed to death in her apartment in San Diego. On April 3, 1990, Holly Tarr, who was 18 years old, was visiting her brother in San Diego. Tara lived in Michigan and she was on spring break. On April 3rd, she was found dead in her brother's apartment. She had been stabbed once in the heart. Either late on the night of May 21st or early on the morning of May 22nd, 38-year-old Elisa Keller was murdered in her San Diego home. She had been stabbed 9 times in the chest. On September 13, 1990, 42-year-old Pamela Clark and her 18-year-old daughter, Amber Clark, were both stabbed to death in their home. In February 1991, Cleophas Fritz Jr. was caught trying to break into a woman's home. A witness saw his license plate and wrote it down. On February 4th, Prince was arrested and he gave a sample of his blood and saliva. His DNA was compared to DNA found at the crime scene of 21-year-old Janie Weinhold. It was a match. The other 5 murders were linked to Prince because they were all very similar, and Prince either lived close to the crime scenes or had friends living close to the crime scenes. The police thought that Prince might have killed Diane Lynn Dahn. Like the other victims, Diane had been stabbed in her chest in her home in the San Diego area. But her murder happened a year and 8 months before Prince killed his first alleged victim. Still, the police wondered if Diane could have been his warm-up act. However, the police didn't find any evidence that connected Prince to Diane's murder, so he was ruled out as a suspect. In 1993, Cleophas Prince Jr. was convicted of 6 murders and he was sentenced to death. Diane Dahn's case became cold once again. Diane's son, Michael, was adopted by a family friend. Since he was just 2 years old when his mother was murdered, he doesn't have any memories of her. Growing up, he saw his biological family frequently, but he always felt like there was something missing from his life. The investigators never gave up on Diane's case. The police believe that they had 2 sources to the killer's DNA. They had fingernail scrapings and a strand of hair that was found in Diane's hand. In 2000, a DNA profile was developed from the fingernail scrapings. It did not lead them to a suspect. More testing was done on the fingernail scrapings in 2001, but didn't lead to an arrest. The hair was also tested for DNA. Once again, no match was found. The DNA profiles were not very strong, so they could not be inputted into the FBI's combined DNA index system, also known as CODIS. In fact, they couldn't even say for sure that the DNA under the fingernails came from the same person who left the hair strand. So the case was shelved once again. Over the next 9 years, DNA technology improved. So in 2010, the case was reopened. This time it was confirmed that the DNA found under the fingernails and the hair came from the same man. But the man's identity was still a mystery. The DNA was entered into CODIS, and again, no match was found. So the case was closed again without an arrest or resolution. Another decade passed. In 2020, the case was reopened to see if genetic genealogy could help identify the killer. The investigators ended up filling out 9 family trees, which consisted of about 1,300 individuals. In March 2022, the police announced that genetic genealogy led them to a man named Warren Robertson. At the time of Diane's murder, Robertson was 28 years old and he worked as a tow truck driver. He was also an Army veteran. He lived in the same apartment complex as Diane. Shortly after the murder, he left his family and moved about 20 miles away to Lakeside, California. A year later, he moved to Indiana. 11 years after the murder, Robertson was living in a mobile home in Columbus, Indiana. Around 4 a.m. on November 25, 1999, a fire broke out in the mobile home. 39-year-old Warren Robertson did not make it out alive. It's believed that a wood oven caused the fire, and Robertson died of smoke inhalation. Robertson had not been considered a suspect in Diane's murder. Diane's family was asked if they knew Robertson or if Diane had any type of relationship with him. They said they had never heard of him. The police did find a possible connection between Diane and Robertson other than them living in the same apartment complex. Both Diane and Robertson were into race car driving and often watched races at El Cajon Speedway, so the police thought that they possibly met there. Diane's family was very thankful to the police. Her sister said that she was sure that she and her parents would die before finding out who killed Diane. Her son, Mark, said that he was blown away by how the murder was solved. He also said, "The answer is that my family received is closure, and closure is everything, even after so much time has passed." Number 1. Jessia Guiterrez. In June 1986, 4-year-old Jessia Guiterrez lived with her mother, 2 sisters, and her brother in a mobile home in Lexington County, South Carolina. Jessica's mother, Deborah Guiterrez, had divorced her husband and the father of her children about 3 years earlier. June 5, 1986 was an average day for the family. They worked in the yard and then they had BLT sandwiches for dinner. In the evening, Deborah painted Jessica's toenails. The night before, Jessica had slept in her mother's bed. Jessica asked if she could sleep in her mother's bed again, but her mother said no. Jessica's brother had an ear infection, so she decided to let him sleep in her bed. At about 11:30 p.m., Jessica was put into a bed with her 6-year-old sister, Becky. Her other sister, Kim, was in the same room, but in a different bed. The next morning, Deborah heard Becky calling out that she wanted some cereal. Deborah got out of bed and noticed the house was in disarray. The curtain on the living room window had been ripped open. The dog, which had been outside, was in the home. The front door was wide open. School papers were strewn about on the floor in the children's room. 4-year-old Jessica was nowhere to be found. Deborah asked Becky where Jessica was, and Becky told her she was gone. She said that a man with a magic hat and a beard took her away. Deborah frantically searched around the home and the property, but found no trace of Jessica. So Deborah called the police. Massive searches were conducted for the 4-year-old girl, but no trace of her was found. The police interviewed Deborah, and she thought that her ex-boyfriend may have been involved in the kidnapping. Deborah had kicked him out of her home just a few days earlier because of his possessive behavior. The police interviewed the ex-boyfriend, and he denied having anything to do with the kidnapping. The police never found any evidence that connected him to the kidnapping. The next suspect was Jessica's biological father. The police tracked him down to California. He was in California at the time of the kidnapping, so he was eliminated as a suspect. The police had one solid piece of evidence, a fingerprint on a window. Deborah knew it was the kidnapper's fingerprint because she watched the windows every day. The print was sent to the FBI, but no match was found. A few weeks after the kidnapping, an acquaintance of the family, 25-year-old Thomas Eric McDowell, who lived in West Columbia, South Carolina, stole a car in Lexington County. He drove to North Carolina, where he broke into a woman's home and raped her. He then stole her car. The woman reported the rape and the stolen car. McDowell was found driving the car a short time later, and he was arrested. In March 1987, he was convicted of rape, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. While in prison, McDowell confessed to his cellmate that he had kidnapped a girl in Lexington County. When he took her, he was wearing a tall cowboy hat. The cellmate told the police about the confession and also wrote to Deborah. He also told the police that McDowell said he had buried the girl's body in a landfill. For weeks, the police searched a landfill near Jessica's home, but they didn't find any traces of her. So the case went cold again. The disappearance of Jessica was incredibly tough on her family. Deborah stopped celebrating Christmas with her children. She sold the home where Jessica was kidnapped a few months later and moved away from Lexington County. She ended up moving back a few months later. Deborah always held out hope that Jessica might come home one day. The case was reviewed in 2008 and 2015, but no arrests were made. In 2017, Deborah Guiterrez was interviewed by a reporter with the state newspaper. She told the reporter that she had been informed that the police had questioned Thomas McDowell again. He said he would confess and tell investigators everything they wanted to know if they granted him immunity. The investigators rejected his offer. The reporter asked the district attorney if this was true, and he would not confirm or deny if this happened. So the case continued to take hold. In 2021, the case was reopened. This time, the local police worked with the FBI. Then in January 2022, 35 years after the murder, they made an arrest. They arrested a longtime suspect, 61-year-old Thomas Eric McDowell. McDowell was charged with murder, kidnapping, and first-degree burglary. According to court documents, he was arrested because his fingerprint matched the one on the window. Also, a witness, believed to have been Jessica's sister, Becky, picked McDowell's photo out of a photo lineup. McDowell had also made several statements to other people where he admitted to killing a young girl. It's unclear why the fingerprint was only matched to him recently, and it's not known when the witness viewed the photo lineup. The police said that they found new evidence after reviewing 3,500 case file pages and interviewing 125 people. The district attorney said that they would have not been able to make an arrest without this new evidence. No trial date for Thomas McDowell has been set. Sadly, the remains of 4-year-old Jessia Guiterrez have never been found. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now, and there's a link in the description box below this video. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.